jewelry that had mysteriously vanished during the move. "I'll think about it," Margaret said, ending the call before Lisa could protest. Eleanor was already typing on her computer. "We need to act fast. They're trying to move you across state lines, which would complicate any legal proceedings. First step, we file for an emergency injunction to freeze the trust assets." But Margaret's children had learned from their mother. They were always one step ahead. When Eleanor's office filed the paperwork the next day, they discovered the trust had been emptied 2 days prior. All assets transferred to a new entity registered in Delaware. "Classic hide-and-seek with assets," Eleanor muttered. But they made mistakes. Arrogance makes people sloppy. The investigation revealed a web of financial maneuvers. Michael's real estate investor friend was actually his brother-in-law. The trust's Delaware registration used Rachel's old law firm address, and Lisa had been withdrawing large sums from Margaret's original accounts months before the power of attorney was even signed. As Eleanor built the case, Margaret faced her own battles. The weekly allowance from Lisa suddenly stopped. The motel manager, apologetic but firm, said he'd received calls from her concerned children about their elderly mother's mental state. Margaret found herself moving again, this time to a women's shelter. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd volunteered at places like this in better days, never imagining she'd one day need their services herself. But the shelter brought unexpected allies. She met other women her age with similar stories: children draining bank accounts, forced sales of family homes, isolating their parents under the guise of care. They formed a support group, sharing resources and strategies for fighting back. One evening, as Margaret shared her story with the group, a local news reporter happened to be visiting the shelter. Sarah Chen had been investigating elder abuse cases for months, looking for a story that would expose the systemic nature of the problem. "Mrs. Sullivan," Sarah said after hearing Margaret speak, "would you be willing to go public with your story?" The old Margaret would have hesitated, worried about family reputation and private matters. But that Margaret had died in a motel room with a newspaper and a notepad. This new Margaret, forged in betrayal and strengthened by righteous anger, didn't hesitate. "When do we start?" The story aired on a Tuesday evening. Margaret watched it on the shelter's community room TV, surrounded by her new friends. Sarah's report was devastating in its detailed exposure of the financial exploitation, featuring interviews with Eleanor about the legal patterns of abuse and experts discussing